Sometimes the divine nucleus, or the spark of the soul, the Funklein of the German mystics. Sometimes it's the apex, the point at which it touches the heavens. We're reading Psychology and Mysticism. And then with a sudden flight to the other end of the symbolic scale, in order to emphasize its particular participation in pure being rather than its indifference from mere nature. It is called the ground of the soul, the ground of being, the foundation or basal stuff indwelt by God, whence springs all spiritual life. Clearly, all these guesses and suggestions aim at one goal and are all to be understood in a symbolic sense, for as Mao Fao observed in answer to his disciples' anxious inquiries on this subject, since the soul of man is a spiritual thing, and thus cannot have divisions or parts, consequently it cannot have height or depth, summit or surface, but because we judge spiritual things by the help of material things, since we know these better and they are more familiar to us. We call the highest of all forms of conception the summit, and the easier way of comprehending things of the surface of the understanding. Here, at any rate, however name we may choose to give it, is the organ of man's spiritual consciousness, the place where he meets the absolute, the germ of his real life. Here is the seat of that deep transcendental feeling, the beginning. We're reading Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. Beginning and end of metaphysics, which is, says Professor Stewart, at once the solemn sense of timeless being, of that which was and is and ever shall be, overshadowing us, and the conviction that life is good. I hold, says the same writer, that it is in transcendental feeling manifested normally as faith in the value of life, and ecstatically as sense of timeless being, not in thought proceeding by the way of speculative construction, but that consciousness comes nearest to the object of metaphysics, ultimate reality. We come to ultimate reality. The existence of such a sense, such an integral part or function of the complete human being, has been affirmed and dwelt upon not only by the mystics but by seers and teachers of all times and creeds, by Egypt, Greece, and India, the poets, the fakirs, the philosophers, and the saints. A belief in its actuality is the pivot of the Christian position. Indeed, of every religion worthy of the name. It is a justification of mysticism, asceticism, the whole machinery of the self-renouncing life, that there is an extreme point at which man's nature touches the absolute, that his ground or substance, his true being, is penetrated by the divine life, which constitutes the underlying reality of things. This is the basis on which the whole mystic claim of possible union with God must rest. Here, they say, is our link with reality, and in this place alone can be celebrated the marriage from which the Lord comes. To use another of these diagrams, it is thanks to the existence within him of this immortal spark from the center fire, that man is implicitly a, quote, child of the infinite. The mystic way must therefore be a life, a discipline which will so alter the constituents of his mental life as to include this spark within the conscious field, bring it out of the hiddenness from those deep levels where it sustains and guides its normal existence, and make it the dominant element around which his personality is arranged. It's clear that under ordinary conditions, and save for sudden gust of transcendental feeling induced by some saving madness such as religion, art, or love, the superficial self knows nothing of the attitude of this silent watcher, this dweller in the innermost, toward the incoming messages of the external world, nor of the activities which they awaken it, concentrated on the sense world, and the messages she receives from it. She knows nothing of the relations which exist between this subject and the unattainable object of all thought. But by a deliberate inattention to messages of the senses, such as that which is induced by contemplation, but by a deliberate inattention to the messages of the senses, such as that which is induced by contemplation, the mystic can bring the ground of the soul, the seat of transcendental feeling, within the area of consciousness, making it amenable to the activity of the will. That's contemplation. Thus, becoming unaware of this unusual and largely fictitious external world, another or more substantial set of perceptions which never have their chance under normal conditions rise to the surface. Sometimes these unite with the normal reasoning faculties. More often they supersede them. Some such exchange, such, quote, losing to find, appears to be necessary if man's transcendental powers are to have their full chance. The two eyes of the soul of man, says the Theologica Germanica, here developing a profound Platonic image, quote, cannot both perform their work at once. But if the soul shall see with the right eye into eternity, then the left eye must close itself and refrain from working, and be as though it were dead. For if the left eye be fulfilling its office toward outward things, that is holding converse with time and the creatures, then must the right eye be hindered in its working. That is in its contemplation. Therefore, whosoever will have the one must let the other go, for, quote, no man can serve two masters. You can't use your eyes and your third eye simultaneously. You have to close one to open the other, I guess. Two eyes of the soul of man. There is within us an immense capacity for perception, for the receiving of messages from outside, and a very little consciousness which deals with them. It is as if one telegraph operator were placed in charge of a multitude of lines. All may be in action, but he may only attend to one at a time. In popular language, there is not enough consciousness to go around. Even upon the sensual plane, no one can be aware of more than a few things at once. These fill the center of our field of consciousness as the object on which we happen to have focused our vision dominates our field of sight. The other matters within that field retreat to the margin. We know dimly that they are there, but we pay them no attention and should hardly miss them if they cease to exist. I think she's talking about. We're continuing to read from psychology. We're studying psychology within mysticism. We're trying to get under it. That's more psychology in Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill.